Been concerns from various sectors of society regarding the minor testifying, and many accusing the NP of making her relive the ordeal. We take a look at this matter in depth with Dr. Shahida Omar. She's the director at the Teddy Bear Clinic. Good afternoon to you. Always good to have you in studio with us.
Thank you.
Now, Doctor, your reaction really on this minor testifying. A lot of people saying that this is secondary victimization by the NPA.
Indeed, I mean, we stand in protest of something like this happening because the alleged perpetrator has admitted guilt. There have been witnesses who have corroborated evidence. So why should a child be put under this kind of testimony when, even though the NPA are justifying that it's not related directly to the situation but surrounding the circumstances, the peripheral information is still related and connected to the central event. And what does that actually do? It's actually reopening raw wounds that were so painful, that was so harmful, and something that the child could not even begin to understand or grapple with, or even come to terms with what has actually happened to her. And I think that is, for me, a lack of insensitivity, where the courts are pursuing their own purposes and own reasons without actually looking at what is in the best interest of the child. The Children's Act clearly stipulates that the child's best interests are paramount, and that would supersede any other process.
I mean, that was my next question to you, to say, do you think our justice system is a bit insensitive? I mean, has it ever happened before where a child was ever called before to testify on such an ordeal?
Well, I'm not sure, but we know that children have been subjected to secondary victimization where they've been induced by further trauma by appearing in court, although measures have been taken to ensure that the child does not come face to face with the courtroom or with the alleged perpetrator because of CCTV and the presence of an intermediary. However, we mustn't confuse or conflate the issues. We still need to look at what is in the best interest of this child. How can we ensure the safety and protection of the child?
So, organizations such as the Teddy Bear Clinic, couldn't you have sort of opposed to this decision before time?
Well, you raise a very valid point, but we were not actually aware because we were not directly involved with the processes or involved in the court preparation of the child.
So in terms of, as you say, it's very traumatic to the child having to relive what happened on that particular night. What does it do to a child? The child was 7 then, the child is 8 now. The child is a minor, obviously, but I suppose this will have sort of long-term effects on her going forward.
Indeed, I think, one cannot actually predict what the long-term outcome could be for this child. Each child is unique. Each child responds to trauma differently, but we can generalize that many children who have been subjected to this kind of an ordeal or trauma, we can project the long-term implications of depression, of post-traumatic stress disorder, eating disorder, self-mutilation, promiscuity, barriers to intimacy, the importance of the trust issues, not being able to trust again, not being able to connect with people, or this pervasive outcome of, or generalization that all males or adult males are not to be trusted. Adult males hurt. So these are things that could linger on, in the trajectory of this child. And of course, even in terms of her scholastic achievement, it may affect the child negatively. So it's actually very sad.
One can only imagine what it would do to the child. The mother herself admitting that she's still traumatized by the incident and saying that she does not wish it to anyone.
Indeed.
So surely the effects will be...
And sometimes we find that children, it predisposes them to become substance abusers. So all kinds of negative, self-defeating, self-destructive behavioral patterns. We do have children that have gone through professional intervention, mental health support provided by families, who have actually come through this with, getting sufficient coping skills to move on. But of course, we cannot dismiss the fact that it does impact negatively on the lives of many child victims.
All right, so in terms of those coping mechanisms, what would you recommend that happens, or what procedures would you recommend to the child now, sort of to try to avoid the effects?
So I think we need to focus on the well-being of the child, not just physical well-being, but it's the emotional and psychological well-being.
But firstly, maybe the question should be, does the child at the age of 8 even understand what happened, or even understand what is currently going on in their life?
So my question to that is, having spoken to many adult survivors of rape, the question is, why did this happen to me? Why me? Why now? So think along the lines of a 7-year-old who cannot even understand what that act means, and why something so brutal has been inflicted on the child. Just think about the immobilization, the child feeling trapped and unable to conceptualize, make sense, or even process that heinous crime or the brutality that the child has been subjected to. It's very difficult.
It's horrible indeed. So the coping mechanisms that you were talking about earlier, how do we go about avoiding the situation getting worse?
So the important thing is that the most important thing is to validate what the child has experienced, to ensure that the child gets immediate family support and believe the child and shift the blame from the child, because often children feel because they've done something wrong or it's their fault, this feeling of guilt and feeling that they're responsible for it. So the important thing is that getting family support, but also ensuring that professional mental health support is provided, the counseling, the therapy, everything else that the child needs in order to not only make sense of it, but to shift the blame and to understand that it was not her fault in this case, and to continuously, consistently provide therapy. Therapy could be for 6 months, it could be for 12 months, it could be for 12 years, it could be lifelong. There is no guarantee how long. And at different stages of development, different crises may trigger this trauma, and therefore it's something that will have to be provided on an ongoing basis, and that is something that enables a person, it equips a person to deal with situations, to resolve and to move on. It's not going to take away the invisible wounds, because physical wounds heal, but the invisible wounds will remain, the scars remain there, and that is what it is, to look at those scars and to enable the child to cope with those scars, to say, this was painful then.
And I think that's the saddest thing. The question is, what then happens to the perpetrator? The state has argued, of course, for the imposition of life imprisonment on the perpetrator. And many people believe that harsher sentences may not necessarily deter perpetrators from doing this, because we report of incidents of rape on young children almost on a daily basis. And I had a guest, I think it was earlier this week, on gender-based violence, who was basically saying that there is nothing that we can do until the perpetrators themselves decide to stop their actions.
Indeed, and I think what you're raising here is so critical, and the president and the government need to hear this. We need to take more stringent measures around prevention strategies. We are all becoming reactive. We have become a reactive society, and knee-jerk responses are elicited. We need to look at starting from the cradle, looking at prevention of what can be implemented to ensure that we have a society free from the scourge of sexual violence and violence inflicted on harmless, helpless, and defenseless children and victims out there.
Dr. Omar, I wish we could talk for some more, but we have to leave it at this time constraints. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
All right, well, there you have it. That's Dr. Shahida Omar. She is the director at the Teddy Bear Clinic, giving her perspective really on a 7-year-old and 8-year-old minor who had testified that was in camera, of course, in her rape case.